And if you're like me, you're ready to sit down and you're ready to get things organized, right? Or as one of my friends shared earlier today, get my life together. So what do? We open up the planner and we start writing. And what goes in there? Excuse me, appointments, meetings, school, church, work, business, ministry, goals, projects, ideas. And then what happens? Before September ever begins, you have just recreated the exact problem that you thought this planner was going to solve. Because you start by asking, where am I going to fit everything, instead of what actually belongs in this? What actually deserves my time in this season? So today, I'm not going to ask you, well, let me just say this. I'm going to ask you to not plan September yet. And I'm going to give you 3 stewardship decisions that are really essential for you to make first. And then you can open up a planner. Okay, so I want you to think, and right now, if you're on live, drop this in the chat. When you think about September right now, what is the first word that comes to mind? Is it the B word, busy? Maybe it's full, maybe it's fun, crazy, excited, overwhelmed, whatever it is. This is exactly why we're having this conversation, because we have this love-hate relationship with fall, right? Especially when we're coming out of a season like summer, where it feels like things are so much more, come as they are. And now we're heading back into, where do I have to be and when? And why do I always feel like I'm behind the plan, right? And so here is decision number 1. Are you ready for this? Decision number 1 is asking this question: what season am I actually in? Now, I don't mean fall versus summer, and I don't necessarily even mean September versus August. Not what should September look like, not what did September look like last year, although that might be really important. We actually did that on the Fall Stewardship Retreat last week, and that was really insightful to say, hey, what was going on a year ago? Okay, not what routine was working 6 months ago, but today I want you to ask the question, what is true now? Maybe you're in a season where you do have kids or grandkids going back to school, right? Maybe your kids, I just saw somebody post today about her son going off to college, and how there's this like tug of war on a mom's heart, right? Because we're excited for them to step out into their next chapter. And yet it's that little piece of us that feels like there's a hole there. Maybe you're back to fall sport routines or ministry responsibilities. Maybe your business is entering a busy season because you're gearing up for Q4 and the end of the year. Maybe you've had some caregiving responsibilities change. Maybe your energy or capacity has changed. I had that conversation today, right? How it doesn't feel the same now as it did in the past. Maybe you've got a new opportunity. I had an opportunity to coach someone today through an opportunity that literally got laid on her plate. But what we did, instead of just, does it fit? We actually paused and we asked the question, what does my season hold, right? And when we looked at what season she was in, it helped give some clarity around whether or not this opportunity fits. Because here is the thing. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is dragging an old rhythm or an old yes or an old habit into a new season and then wondering why it doesn't fit. Because something that was a faithful yes 6 months ago, 12 months ago, even a couple of weeks ago, may not be what you are supposed to be stewarding and moving forward in the season that you are living now. Now, for my high capacity ladies, that does not mean that you are not enough, okay? It does not mean, I think we often tell ourselves, I should be able to do this, or sure, I can, because it doesn't feel like it's that much more, but yet it is one more thing that gets added to the juggling act that we're doing. What if just simply your season has changed? So Sheena is on today. Sheena's about to move. We've been having this conversation. She's moving to a very different place than where she is now. And so Sheena, I love a transition like that, because what happens is now you're paying attention to, these are things that were faithful yeses when I was where I was. And as you're stepping into a new season, into a new place physically, now you get to ask that question, does it still belong in this season? Does it still belong in this place? Now, we don't all have the luxury like Sheena of getting to move to a completely different country and start all over again. But I think this stepping into fall, almost 1 week out from September, can be the time that we stop and ask this first question, okay? So our first discernment question was this, in case you're just joining us: what season am I actually in? And I don't mean fall, winter, spring, summer. I mean, what does this season hold? What is important in this season? What are the things that are going on in the context of my life, my business, my ministry, the things that God is asking me to move forward? And I want you to finish this sentence when it comes to that one question, okay? Because this is so important. This is what we did on the fall retreat last week. This is what I did with my friend today who is discerning this opportunity. This fall is a season of what? This fall is a season of what? And I would love if you're on live, drop 1 or 2 words in there. Kathy shares, this is confirmation I'm moving into a new season. I was wrestling with the decision about something I've been doing and whether it still fits this new season for me. Okay, I love that you brought that up, Kathy, because why do we just expect that everything just has to now, figure out how to fit it into this next place? I think so often we just do that and we just keep adding more and wonder why we feel like there's less time, there's less of us, there's less of everything to go around. Making new friends. I love that. And I know Kathy is really focusing on a new church community and also how she's building her business here on Substack to help women with their intentional discipleship. And so relationships are going to be really important in a way, Kathy, that, maybe they weren't getting that kind of time and focus in your past season, because it was time for something else. So this is where, again, we don't just start adding one more thing to the plate. We really discern, what is this season for? Okay, what is this season for? And if it is a season of transition, is your plan leaving room for transition? Is your plan assuming that what was a yes before is still a yes? Or are you just pausing to say, hey, here are the yeses on my plate as I'm stepping into this new season? So whether it's because of a change in the calendar, whether it's because of a change of location like Sheena has, whether it's a change of focus like Kathy has, whatever the change is, or just a change that you're sensing, it's a really good time to pause and ask that first question. What is this season for? Okay. Now, what we really want to look at is, okay, what is the thing that needs to make sure it gets my focus, time, and attention, right? And paying attention to what else is in the season. So as I was coaching my friend through this morning, she has this great opportunity to take over a business/ministry from somebody else. And I said, before we start going like, okay, does it fit in your, in your time blocks? Let's pull back and look at the season you're in. She helps watch her grandson a couple days a week. She's about to have a new granddaughter. She's got other ministry responsibilities that she's doing. And so it was from that place that then we were able to look at the logistics of, does this fit? Right? But had she just looked at, okay, yes, I can give this X number of hours a week, without discerning her season, she would have probably felt very overwhelmed and very pulled and scattered in lots of directions because we're trying to do all these different things all in one season. So that's the first question that we need to be asking. And this is exactly why, if you haven't seen inside the Redeem Her Time Planner, I actually just did an article about this. You can look at, go grab it at redeemhertime.com/plan. Let me put this in the chat for those of you who are on here. Can't talk and type at the same time, so give me a second. I think you have to copy paste it. I don't think it's clickable, but redeemhertime.com/plan. I intentionally put a seasonal reset in between each season in the planner. And the beautiful thing is this is an undated planner, so you don't have to wait until January or feel like you've wasted all this time, right? But here's what I want you to remember. As you are starting to think about, how am I going to plan for the month of September, don't just carry August priorities or May's priorities, or even January's priorities into September, just because you wrote them down 8 months ago when it was the first of the year, right? Or even just because you wrote it down last month when you were coming into August. I want you to pause and ask, what has changed about my season? What belongs in this season? And what can I release? Right? Your planner should serve the season that you're living. Your life is not supposed to serve your planner. Who needed to hear that, right? Give me an amen. If you're like, okay, Lissa, okay, this has given me a little bit of freedom because I've always felt like a planner just makes me feel like I'm boxed in, right? You've been trying to plan a new season with an old season plan. That's exactly why you need a seasonal reset. And that's exactly why I put it inside the Redeem Her Time Planner. So if you haven't seen inside, because I know all you planner snobs, you're like, I got to see the layouts. I want to see if it's going to work for me. So you can go to redeemhertime.com/plan. I've dropped that in the chat. And you can actually see pictures of the inside. So if you want to see, what does the monthly spread look like? What does the weekly spread look like? What do some of the extra seasonal resets look like? Go check that out, and you can see how adaptable this is for what you love. Okay. But knowing your season still isn't enough, because now we actually have to discern what deserves to move in it. So let's go to decision number 2. What deserves to move? Okay. So when you know what season you're in, now you can actually ask this question. What deserves to move into this season? And this is actually a question that I was talking through with my friend earlier today as we were discerning this opportunity that came across her path and she has to give an answer to. And I said, okay, if you decide this does move into this season, this is what you're called to move forward, then what are you going to need to move out? And she immediately was able to identify something that, it wasn't taking as much time as it had in the past. And yet when she started looking at this season and what this holds and bringing this new opportunity into it, it became very clear, this is the thing that's going to need to move, or I am going to be over capacity. And I think this is where so many of us as high capacity women, we get ourselves in trouble, right? Because we look at all the good things and we think, yes, I can do that. Please tell me that I'm not alone, right? And it may be that one thing just feels like a really easy once a month, here and there type of thing. But pretty soon, all these things start building up, right? And everything starts becoming a priority. And oftentimes those things start, becoming priorities at the same time. So just because something is good doesn't mean that it belongs in this season. It doesn't mean that it has to be right now, right? Just because you're capable of doing it doesn't mean you're called to carry it. And on the stewardship retreat last week, I shared an example of an opportunity that came to me. And I just, as I went through the fall yes filter, I could see that, yes, this thing matters. Yes, this does build into my skill set. I already have some connection with what's going on. But when it got to the, is this for now? The answer was a really clear no. Okay, so just because you could be really good at something, or just because someone asked something of you, does not necessarily mean that it should be getting your yes. Because if it's going to get your yes, then it's going to have to belong somewhere in your planner, right? Or really somewhere in our capacity in our mind, right? So I don't want you just choosing 5 big priorities for September. Here's what I always challenge women to do. I know you have 100 things on your plate, and I know the women I work with, everything matters. I know you because I am you. And I've been working on this for many, many years. But here's the question I always ask. What is the one thing, or what is a one thing that deserves intentional movement in this season? That does not mean it's the only thing you're going to do and everything else goes in the back burner. You're still going to feed people. You're still going to answer emails. You're still going to go to appointments. You're still going to run your business or your ministry. We are simply asking, what do I refuse to let continually get pushed aside by everything else? And this is actually a question we asked last night. Everyone who has the planner gets to come to our monthly planning session. And this is one of the questions we ask each month. Because what happens? We have great intentions. We say something is going to be a priority, but our calendar sometimes tells a different story. And we get to the end of a month and we look back and say, wow, that thing just kept getting pushed to the back burner. I had a project that literally for a month, I kept saying, I'll get to that next week. I'll get to it next week. I'll get to it next week. Because there were other things that just, yes, they were very important. And yet this past weekend, I took time to sit down before the end of the month and say, okay, I'm just going to get this done. And already it has returned my RODI, my return on time invested. It has helped me to be able to more efficiently do some of the other things that I was wanting to do, right? But if we don't ever pause to notice what do we let continually get pushed aside by everything else, then it's going to be the can that we keep picking down the road. So here is your brave moment. Hi, Monique. Glad you're joining us. What is your one thing that as you're moving into September and or the fall that deserves intentional focus so that you can see meaningful progress this fall? And I always say this too. It doesn't mean it has to get to a finish line. I'm working with several gals who are writing books, several gals who are launching communities, other people who are stewarding very different things in their business or their ministry or the work they're called to do. And for a lot of them, they're not going to be done with that thing in the month of September. That's okay. What is the one thing that you know needs to get some focused time and attention in order to make meaningful movement this fall? Okay, so I want you to drop that in the chat, your membership marketing. Okay, Monique just opened up a membership, and it's really helping women to get clear on their life and how to get organized in their life. She also does some organizing in your home as well. And so I love that, Monique, because when we identify that, now it's not competing with the attention of everything else at the same level. Okay, that does not mean you're not going to have all these other pressing demands and things that you could be doing. Yes, you will. You are the kind of person that people probably come to or look to or expect that you're just going to do the thing. Okay. But for those of you who are like, Lissa, I got a list of 10 or 20 or 30, or maybe even 3, I'm going to lovingly challenge you to choose one. one thing that is going to make the others easier, maybe, or that you would regret most not tending, or is going to make the biggest impact in this thing moving forward. So Kathy says, in-person events and studies with women in my community and this new church. Yes, and there's something about Kathy has been so good at putting out all this amazing content. And yet what she's been discovering is when there's real connection, conversations around these studies and these events, it makes such a difference. It compresses time. So that is a great place for you to be focusing, Kathy. I love that. And Monique, I would even say when it comes to marketing your membership, what could one way be, one thing that under that marketing umbrella that would help that move forward? Because again, you can go on the internet and find 100 different ways to market your membership. And guess what? You start doing all of them, you're going to get nowhere. So really dialing in, like Kathy just did, what is one way that I'm going to give focused, intentional time, right, over time, so that way this thing can make meaningful movement. And this is why a planner that just gets filled up with our appointments and our to-do lists is not going to solve your time problem, right? A planner can find room for something, but it's really the stewardship lens where we step back and we discern. That's what's going to help us decide, does it even belong here? And that is why the Redeem Her Time Planner starts upstream from the schedule. We start with the stewardship piece first, because we're not called to fit everything in. We're not called to do even all the things we see others doing around us that are on the internet and in our news feeds, or even maybe that was in the last season. We take time to discern what belongs in this season before we give it space. And what I love is when you have a place to put, I always say pencil to paper, because things tend to change. Right now, you can get it out of your head, out of all your to-do lists, out of your Google Docs, right, and put it in one place. Because now, when you identify this is one thing that matters, now you can create, right, a plan for how to meaningfully move that forward over the next month, over the next 2 months, 3 months, until the end of the year. So if you've bought some, planner after planner, I was talking to somebody the other day. She's like, listen, I have a pile of planners sitting in my corner of my office and trying to figure out, do I try to use them up? Do I just let them go and start fresh? We all kind of have that planner guilt because we bought it hoping it was going to be what would finally fix everything, right? But it doesn't, because it doesn't start in the stewardship place. And that is how the Redeem Her Time Planner is different. So if you haven't seen inside of it, you can grab the link in the chat, redeemhertime.com/plan. Go take a look inside. And I share a little bit in there about why I created some of the sections in there that I did, because we have to discern and then decide before we ever stick it in our planner. Otherwise, like I said, we're just perpetuating the problem that we picked up the planner in the first place. Even if you are using the color-coded stuff and you're trying to make everything look pretty, when you haven't discerned, does this actually belong in this season? And what season am I in? Then you will just stay busy. Okay? Because once you decide what deserves to move into that season, because you know what this season involves, now you've got our third decision. Okay, so here's where we've been so far. For those of you who are just catching up with us, the first thing that we looked at was, what season am I in? If we're not paying attention to the context of the season of life or in business and ministry that we're in, it's really hard to discern, does this thing belong? Okay, so your first decision, or the first thing you need to look at is, what does this season look like? What are the life things, the health things, the relationship things, the ministry things, the other things that are going to impact where my time and attention goes this month? And then once you've discerned that, now you can take this opportunity and say, okay, does this belong in this season? Does this fit, right? Is this the one thing that I'm being called to faithfully move forward? And I always say, despite all the other stuff that's happening, so many of us use our season of life as our excuse or a reason why we can't. Here's the thing, you guys, we will always have life happening. Somebody just posted something on, I don't know, it was Facebook or Instagram. She's like, life be lifing, right? I mean, how many of us are like, yeah, we come out of one thing thinking now things are going to ease up, and then, something else changes or happens or gets discovered. So just, we need to stop saying, I can't because, and say, what would this look like inside of a season that contains this? Okay. Which leads us to decision number 3. Where will it faithfully live? Right? And that means you have to know, what is your season? You have to know what deserves to move forward in that season. And now you're going to ask the question, where is it faithfully going to live? Not sporadically, not when I feel like it or remember, or when there's time left over at the end of the day. Has anybody ever found that time at the end of the day? Like, this is why we get to the end of a day, a week, a month, and we're like, where'd the time go? Yeah, there wasn't time left over just to do the thing. So we have to decide, where is it faithfully going to live? Because just saying you want to write the book is not it's not a plan. Or I want to work on my health. It's not a plan. Or I want more time with God. That's not a plan. Eventually, if you would like to see something make meaningful movement through a month, through a season, it needs to live somewhere. It needs to have a home in your day, if it's a daily thing, or in your week, if it's a weekly thing, or maybe it's just in your month. So I'm going to give you 3 practical questions when you're thinking about, where does this one thing live in the season that I'm in? Okay. Question number 1 is, how much? This is around your time. Okay. These are all questions around your time. How much? What amount of time, let's say per week, is actually going to move this thing forward? You may be working on something that you're like, okay, this needs to get 30 minutes a day, right? If you're here on Substack and you're growing Substack and you're not spending a minimum of 30 minutes a day actually interacting with real people, putting things out there and responding to what people are saying on your stuff and finding their things as well, you are not going to move forward, right? So that could be one example where maybe it's a little bit of time every single day, or at least every working day. Or maybe you are working on perhaps, a bigger project, right? And so it may not be something you want to spend 30 minutes a day on, but maybe I was talking to someone today. She's like, I would love to make Thursdays the day that I focus on this alone. So that way she's not going to schedule business appointments. She's not going to be volunteering for things in the community. She's not going to be going to the doctor or the gym or the hairdresser. That day is that day for her to focus on that project. Okay. And she knows I would like a big chunk of time. Maybe it's 4 hours, maybe it's 6 hours, right? So here's the next first decision you need to make, is how much time would actually move that one thing forward. And I encourage you, if you're on live, drop that in the chat. If you're watching a replay, put that in a comment or write it down at least so you can see it, because that's the first decision we have to make before we can figure out where it lives. Okay. The second decision is, how often does this need your attention? Is this something that needs daily attention? Or is this something that maybe just needs your attention once or twice a week? Or maybe once or twice a month, or once or twice a season, or maybe even once or twice a year, right? Not everything has to get our time all the time. And maybe that's why you feel so scattered and like there isn't time for everything, because everything is getting time all the time. So when it comes to this one thing that it's time to move forward in this season, what amount of time would actually move this forward? And then how often does it need your attention? We call that our frequency. Okay. Is this a daily thing? Is this a Tuesday, Thursday thing? Is this a Fridays thing? Is this the last week of the month? What is the frequency that your one thing needs? And I would encourage you, if you're on live, make these decisions right here in the chat, because when we think about it, 10% chance it happens. We write it down, 42% chance it happens. We share it with others, 76% chance that it happens. And you guys want to know what the secret sauce is to get up in the 90s? Get accountability support, which I'm happy to do if you want to upgrade. Okay, the third question we have to ask under where does it live is where. Where in your day or your week do you actually have the capacity for this kind of thing? Notice I didn't say the time. I said the capacity. Because some things you need to have a fresh set of eyes and ears or a mind, right? And so it may be earlier in your day. There may be some things that, you need quiet in your home. And so maybe it happens when the kids or grandkids are down for a nap, or at the end of the day because your husband went to bed early, right? So there are going to be different factors as to where in your day this fits best, but really asking where in your day, when you think about this thing and the kind of focused time that it needs, where in your day or week do you actually have the capacity for this? And here's where I teach something called time anchor zones. So I do not believe in time blocking, where you just put a timestamp on your to-do list and plop it in a box and hope that it happens. That's a recipe for disaster. Okay. A time anchor zone is where we break your day into the 5 time anchor zones. And each one of them has a focus, and what is it time for during this time of my day? Okay. So here's the thing. Just because you have an empty hour in your calendar does not mean you have open capacity. Because if you're trying to do your most focused work during the part of your day when your brain has packed its bags and gone home, anybody with me, after a certain time, you're like, I had turned into a pumpkin and I am checked out. The problem may not be that you need to get more organized or get better at managing your time or get more disciplined. You just simply put that one thing in the wrong place. Okay? Who needed to hear that? Because it may not be that you don't have time. It may be that you're not thinking about, when is it time for this? So I want you to look at the one thing that you chose. Don't give me your whole schedule. I just tell me in the chat or tell me in the comment if you're here afterwards, or hit reply, send me a DM. When does that kind of thing fit you best? And let's start really simple. Maybe you haven't gone through the starter kit yet, so you don't know what the 5 time anchor zones are. That's okay. Let's go really easy. Is it morning? Is it midday? Or is it later in the day? Okay. When you think about that one thing, where does it fit? Does it fit in the morning, in the midday, or later in the day? And for those of you who are free subscribers, you get the starter kit, which is going to help you with those 5 time anchor zones. I'm going to walk you through the 5 time zones of your day and what it's time for. So then it becomes really easy to say, oh, this is the time zone this fits in. But even inside of there, we still have some choice around it. Okay. So if you're already a free Redeem Her Time subscriber, then you have the time anchor zones exercise in your starter kit. So your assignment after this live is to go open that up or download it if you haven't yet. Take the one thing that you just named and figure out where that kind of work belongs in your day. Okay, that's as simple as it is. If you are not subscribed yet, then all you have to do is hit subscribe before you leave, and I will drop the starter kit in your inbox ASAP. And that way you can walk through it in 15 minutes, less than. I'm going to walk you through how to start shifting the way you look at your time and how to start looking at your day in those 5 time anchor zones so that when you do identify something that matters, you know exactly where it lives. And that means that as it's getting time and it's being protected, it is going to see change. It's going to grow. I always say that where we are right now, whether it's in your business, your ministry, your health, a relationship, it is the consequence, good or bad, of how you have invested time in this up till now, right? Which means if we want to move something forward in this next season, because we know this is what the Lord has put in front of us, then we're going to need to invest time in it, right? But it's not just going to happen on its own. It only happens when we make these discerning decisions. So before you plan September, before you even pick up the Redeem Her Time planner, okay, here are the 3 things that we're going to discern first before you open the planner, okay? Number 1, the season you're in. What is true of this season right now? Not the one you wished it was, not the one it was a year ago, not even the one it was a month ago, the season that you're in right now. Okay, what is that? The second one is your focus. What is the one thing that you want to see make meaningful movement? Not all the things you could, but one thing that you will commit to giving focus to so that it is moving forward over the next month. And then the third discernment decision is the place. Where will it faithfully live? Whether that's in your day or in your week. And when we stop to discern the season, the focus, the place, then you can open up a planner. Okay? So last night inside of our monthly planning session, we did exactly that. Kathy was there, right? Kathy can attest to this. We paused long enough to preview and plan and pray before we just rush into another month. Because none of us are going to feel any better at the end of September if we just let the calendar fill up and hope that we keep up. How many of us, though, have tried that before, right? And I don't want you walking into September with a beautifully organized calendar full of things that you never stop to decide or discern if it even belonged there, right? That is what's so powerful. And when we do a monthly planning session, when you get the planner, you get to come to the monthly planning session. And I don't just hand you the pages and say, good luck, go do this. You know what women tell me all the time? Lisa, I love coming to the monthly planning sessions because then, guess what? Get this, ready? I actually do it. I actually do it, right? Because there's 1 hour once a month set aside to pause and do these discerning things before we just let our calendar fill up, right? And that is what it means to steward our time. That's what it means to redeem our time. That's what it means to say, my time is so valuable that before I spend another minute, I'm going to pause and ask, what is it that I should be spending it on? I mean, let's be honest. If I gave you $1,000, you wouldn't just start throwing it out the window at anyone who asked for it, right? You'd probably be like, wow, this is really valuable. Where do I think I want to spend this $1,000? Right? What would I like to see come out of this $1,000, right? We would always stop and ask those questions when it comes to money. And yet so many of us are not asking it around our time. Okay. So If you do all three of these things and September still doesn't go according to plan, guess what? That's because there still is, right, a Tuesday at 10 a.m. There still are the times when something happens that we didn't expect, that we couldn't see, that we didn't know to plan for. And here's the beautiful thing. Making a plan does not mean that everything has to go according to plan, right? We are just making the best decisions we can ahead of time with the information that we have, with the things that we know fit in this season and what we want to meaningfully move forward, and making a decision on where we think it lives. But the goal is not to create a planned life. Well, how about this? Yeah, a life so planned that like there can't be interruptions. I was talking with somebody in the DMs today, and she was sharing about interruption that happened. And it was a really big one. It was something that was requiring now some more of her extra time and attention in order to care for what had just happened. And so the goal is not to know what matters well enough that you know like everything that's going to happen, but it's to know what matters well enough so that you know what to return to when life does interrupt it, right? And here is where we don't have to restart. We don't have to say, I'll wait till Monday or next month or January 1st. We can just reset, because when we have a plan, we've got something to return to. And one simple question. This one question brings you back to everything. And this question is all over the Redeem Her Time Planner. So if you haven't looked inside, go to redeemhertime.com/plan and take a look inside. Here's the question. If you're in my world, you already know what it is. What is it time for? And you may want to add, what is it time for now? Right? So whether you're asking that question going into a new month, into a new season, even into a new day, or like the next hour in front of you, before you get off this live or before you finish listening to this replay, stop and ask the question, what is it time for now? And then take that next faithful step, right? So before you go, if you haven't already, I want you to put your one thing for this fall in the chat. And if you've already told me, then I want you to tell me where in your day or your week is this going to live? Because naming it matters, and so does making the decision around where it lives. And this is really the practice that we make inside the Redeem Her Time Planner, right? We're discerning our season. What is true now? What's the context in which this thing needs to live? Does it fit? Then we work on our focus. What do I want to see move forward? And then we work on the place. Where does it faithfully live? But so many of us just jump right to the place. We just jump to putting everything in the calendar and wonder why it feels like we're being pulled in a million directions. Okay. And so once we discern the three things we did today, now you can pick up the planner. Okay. So I started this off by saying, don't pick up your planner yet. Okay. Make these three decisions first, ask these three questions, and then you can start filling your calendar. And if you're ready to practice this instead of just starting September by trying to fit it in, and you don't have a planner, or you want to check out the Redeem Her Time Planner, go to redeemhertime.com/plan. Check it out. I am doing free shipping in the US. If you are international, send me a DM so we can look at what would it cost to get it to you, and then you can make a decision if that's worth it to you. And here's the beautiful thing. The Redeem Her Time Planner is undated. And I did that on purpose. I want you to be able to start on, August 25th, right? Whatever day it is, it's the right time to redeem your time. And here's the other good news. You're not going to figure out alone, right? You're going to have planning support from me. You're going to have those monthly planning sessions together, and you're going to have a group of other women who are also asking the same question. What is it time for? So I hope this has been helpful. Those three questions, the three decisions that you need to make before you pick up your planner. This is what's going to help us head into September, knowing what matters and giving it a faithful place to live. And do you think that by stopping and asking these three questions, it's going to change? Yes, it's always better to have a terrible plan than no plan at all. It's so true, right? I work with so many people who are like, I've given up on planning because it doesn't ever happen. And I always ask them, I love to just be curious, not from a place of judgment. How is that working for you? How is it working to say, well, I don't make plans because they're never going to happen anyway? And can I tell you, 100% of the people that I have had that conversation with, which is a lot, have said it's not. It's a circus act. It's chaos. It's always all over the place. Yes. So having a plan, and it doesn't even have to be a terrible plan. What if we just say having a plan, right, is better than having no plan at all? Because then you have something to return to when Tuesday at 10 a.m. happens. But here's the thing. Your plan should not be made around all the things you could do or all the things that are already starting to fill your September calendar. but really around what is it time for? What has God called me to move forward in this season? And then where does it live? So I don't just say it matters. I actually live like it matters. And then I guarantee, let's come back a month from now. And I bet your calendar is going to tell a different story. I bet it's going to feel different. And you're not going to have another month where you said, man, I said this thing mattered, or I said I was going to move this forward and I didn't. And again, remember, this is not about productivity. It's not about accomplishment. It's not about checking things off your list. It's about being a faithful steward. But here's the beautiful thing. When we are faithful stewards, we understand the value of the time we've been given and the assignment that God has given us and these things that he's called us to move forward. Then a great healthy byproduct of that is going to be that thing happening. It is going to be, right, that thing moving forward or that box getting checked, but not from a place of productivity's sake, from a place of stewardship, right? This is what God has entrusted to me. And so I'm being faithful to give it the time and attention it needs so that it can make a bigger impact for the kingdom. And so that's what Redeem Her Time is all about. So if you haven't checked out the planner and you either need a refresh or you want a different way of looking at it, grab it, because you're going to get my support as we are discerning what belongs in it. And then how do we actually make it fit the real life that we're in? So thanks for being here. I can't wait to see what your story is at the end of September. And I'm here to help you any way that I can.